Aristotle wrote, "It is the mark of an educated man to look for precision in each class of thing, insofar as its nature admits."
Hey, this is KB. I'm a technologist, thought leader, and self-published author. I've been publishing ebooks, print books, audio, video, and other content online since 2015. I stumbled quite a bit, tried many different types of content, marketing strategies, software tools, and social media streams. Now I'm here to help you learn from my mistakes and find inspiration along the way. We'll take a journey together to leverage your content, dive into practical tips, and test out actionable strategies that move you from posts to profit. This is the Self-Pub Empire Podcast.
Welcome back, my friend, to another episode of the Self-Pub Empire Podcast. Today, I'm very excited. I want to talk about self-publishing your book outside of the Amazon Kindle sphere of influence. In 2020, the House Judiciary Committee in the United States found that Amazon controlled more than 50% of the overall print book market. That's online and offline, like digital and print, and more than 80% really of the ebook market. So what that means is 50% of all the books sold, which is either in bookstores or online, were really through Amazon somehow, some way. That's massive. That is completely massive. Believe it or not, Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, is not the only game in town for publishing your work. Something that I use when I don't want my book exclusively on Amazon, and there's reasons for that, which I'll talk about. There's a platform called draft2digital.com, and we'll make sure we'll put that in the show notes, the link to that site. Not sponsored by Draft2Digital here at all. I just feel that it's a very good platform for making sure that you get your book out to as many places as possible. And so that's draft2digital.com. So far, it's the best platform I've found to push my book out to the vast majority of outlets that are out there. And I think it'll work for you too, for your book, for your wonderful creative work. There is one exception to this, which is Google Play Books. I kind of chuckle about Google Play Books because they are actually not a huge significant player out there, but it is enough that no way to say it any other way. You probably should not ignore Google Play Books. It is important because Google Play Books doesn't allow you to use an aggregator of any kind to publish to their platform. It is strictly only through their interface online. It's really not hard. I'm not going to go into that today. And so therefore, you really have to go into Google Play Books and you do all those things by hand that you normally would do for publishing a book there. However, the good news in this case for Google Play Books is that it's very, very similar to pretty much all of the other platforms out there. So I'm very, very excited today to talk about getting your books to 99% of the book outlets. But why? Let's back up a little bit here because we've talked about Amazon before. A lot of people know Kindle Direct Publishing, but why would we even do this? So if Amazon has so much of the market, why bother? Why would you publish anywhere else? There's a couple of good reasons to do that outside of the Kindle Direct Publishing platform. Using an aggregator, and I'm going to use that word a lot, so let's talk about that real briefly. An aggregator is a company with a single interface that will take the information you have and push it out to outlets for you on your behalf and take all that metadata and format it the right way and connect up behind the scenes to all those outlets. So an aggregator will do that for you. So an aggregator outside of Amazon really allows you to control more of exactly which extended markets you can publish to. Amazon also wants you to go exclusive with Kindle publishing and will give you some incentives for marketing and other things, but you have a less control over the extended markets and where your books actually go to in those extended markets. It does allow you to do worldwide publishing, of course. Territory management is in there as well. That's a whole nother topic to talk about, but that's related to this. So really, what is an extended market? We should probably define that as well. The extended market are things such as libraries for physical print books, small print bookstores, independent bookstores, even larger bookstores for physical and other electronic books. There's also library ebook outlets like Overdrive, and I'm going to mention other electronic book publishing outlets such as Barnes and Nobles, which has their own ebook reader, the Nook, and that is an extended market as well. So the aggregator tends to be more agnostic and not competing directly with some of these outlets, so they connect up to them to allow you to publish out to all these different spaces. Apple Books as well. That's another option that's out there. We'll touch on that a little bit later. So really, locking yourself into Amazon means that you can't publish in other outlets, and they make sure that your book stays within their ecosystem, which they give you incentives to do with certain free promotions and things like that, which we can touch on some other time. If you use something else like a different aggregator, many times you can set the price, though, the way you want to set it. Amazon has some very specific price restrictions, particularly for ebooks. Print is not as straightforward because there's printing costs. So the control over that really depends on printing costs to print the book. And that, of course, depends on size, paper, and so on and so forth. But really for ebooks, there's some particular restrictions depending on the royalty schema you use. Not going to talk about that today. That's for another time. I can cover that in a different podcast, and we'll dive deeper into Kindle book publishing in the future with those details. But that's really the basics. You can lock yourself into Amazon, which gives you some marketing tools, but then you're restricted on price to some degree, or you can publish on Amazon and not restrict it and leave it open so you can use a different aggregator to publish to more book locations. Depending on your type of book, you might want to choose one versus the other. My opinion on this and my recommendation is that when you're starting out, publish everywhere. Put your book out to as many places as possible, and do not lock yourself into Amazon, at least at the start. That's my opinion on that. Controlling more of the price is another point here, allows you to actually do some kind of interesting things, such as like setting the price in a very, very low for a small book, and folks don't feel the need to worry about download costs and things like that. They might see your book potentially as an alternative to something else. I don't necessarily recommend this for publishing just poorly made material and making that nearly free or free on an aggregator, which you can do in some of those outlets. That kind of strategy degrades your quality and might impact your reputation. However, if it's something similar to what you might want to put out on a website as a free resource or a first chapter or something like that, you could distribute that through an aggregator and set that price to $0 as a free download out there. That's a scrappy marketing strategy that does work. It'll get your name and your book out there, and maybe people will want to get more, and they're going to look for your book in total since they got a chapter and they were able to kind of sample it. That way, another thing you get is the search engines will pick that up and search for those outlets and have those searches available to them. So you'll get your name out there further. So to recap, really the difference with using an aggregator outside of Amazon versus the Amazon ecosystem, you really gain two things. Number one, you get a much more detailed control over your price for your book, depending on your marketing strategy or whether or not you're just putting your book out there. Number two, you get more specific control over which outlets that you want to publish to, and you actually get to see what those extended markets actually are. Amazon won't tell you. It just says extended marketplace. Some of the price options and promotions you really can't get on Amazon due to some of those restrictions. As I said, there's a few ways to do so with Kindle promotions, but you get that control with an aggregator. Draft to Digital has, at the time of this podcast, really about 14 outlets that it will publish automatically to. How much time it takes for each one does depend on the outlet and how much time the acceptance systems and so on and so forth go through for those books. The cool part is that it will publish to all of them from one central dashboard. That's an enormous time saver when you're trying to get your book out to the world to as many places as possible, including libraries, especially with Overdrive, which is an excellent ebook aggregator outlet for libraries throughout the countries. There are also a few myths about using aggregators as well, so let's address those right now. One of the many reasons I liked Draft Digital is that they've added print books to their capabilities. Within the last couple of years, very similar to Kindle Print on Demand, they can print your book without having to keep a large or any inventory at all. Similarly, Amazon allows you to do an audio recording of your book. And recently, Draft Digital combined with Findaway Voices, and you're really able to publish audiobooks through that aggregator as well. They don't have hardcover, which is in relatively new in beta on Amazon, and that is a little bit newer, so they don't have something like that. But if you think about the big three to get your books out to as many places as possible, you can do print, you can do ebook, which again is where they started, and you have the most control, and you can do audio. And those go through all those outlets. Kindle will do the same thing, and they've really matched that. So it's kind of I feel a little bit like this is a David and Goliath story where you've got a aggregator or aggregators that are working with all these other outlets and kind of competitors for Amazon, and you've got Amazon themselves. So this is the advantage of making sure that you go through that aggregator. And those are the myths that you can't do a print book, you can't do audio. At one point in time, that was true. Honestly, when I started with Draft Digital in about 2017, that is the case. It really was just ebooks. So I really didn't dig into it too deeply at the time. Relatively recently, within the last couple of years, they've really expanded their portfolio and expanded and purchased other things that they can use to expand their portfolio and their ecosystem. So to recap this part, the top reasons for looking outside of Kindle publishing is really to ensure that you have the most coverage possible. And it allows you to have more coverage and control. The second reason is that you have more control of your pricing, particularly for the ebook space, really specifically for the ebook space. The final reason is that you can pretty closely simulate all the tools available on Kindle publishing, outside of Kindle publishing, and so you're not locked down. Going there, that'll expand your reach to over 90%, and in Google Play Books should get everyone to about 99% of outlets, Amazon, Google Play Books, and all of the locations that Draft Digital supports. Don't forget, with the right aggregator, you can still publish to Kindle as well. You can do that centrally without having to use Amazon. Me personally, I like to use both for most of the books that we publish out there in this space, because starting on Amazon ensures that the quality pieces that it checks are actually there, and they're a little tighter. I'm going to add that as a little tip. Amazon's quality checks are a little tighter than the aggregators. So if you have a high quality book, very high quality book on Amazon, you're really likely to be able to get that out through the aggregator, and there will be no problems with that book whatsoever. So that's a little tip for you there as well. So that covers the why we're doing this. The what is actually very interesting. The bigger part of this work is, what are you actually doing? Let's talk about that. What is the aggregator actually really doing behind the scenes? It's a centralized interface. That is the advantage. That is their biggest selling point. It allows you to upload your manuscript and work through the metadata around it. What's metadata? Description, keywords, so on and so forth. Description and information about the book itself. That's your metadata. And then when you have that all set and done, you automatically publish or push that manuscript to all the outlets that it connects to. I know I'm repeating myself here, but this is critically important in the space of what we're talking about here. It's really, really important to get this concept down, because it can really add to your reach out there to your audience. Your mileage may vary depending on which aggregator you choose. Generally speaking, the important pieces are the manuscript and the cover. The keywords, title, authors, etc., the metadata, those pieces get uploaded. And so once you do that, you get to select where you want your books to appear. It goes through some quality checks, just like Kindle publishing. And again, I said before, Google Play Books does not allow you to do this with any aggregator, so you have to do that on your own. But that's okay. It's a small market share. I've heard some different numbers between 5% of ebook marketing potentially 10% as well. But that 5% or 10% is really more than the 0%. So it might be worth it for certain books that you want to get out there. I personally haven't had that much success with it, but it is definitely an option that you can use. It's really up to you. Adding that in gets you really close to that 99%. Draft to digital specifically, as you start with either an ebook or a print book, much like in Amazon, it allows you to connect that book with Findaway Voices to get your audiobook out there, which we definitely are going to cover in the future. We're going to talk about audiobooks as well and how to do that, which is very similar to recording a podcast. That's the what. Let's talk about the how. We're going to take a quick walkthrough here of getting set up on Draft to Digital. It's actually pretty easy, but I'm going to go into a couple of things that you want to make sure you do correctly and think about so that you can set yourself up for success before you even get online or even open your account. Of course, that is the first thing you have to do. You have to sign up for an account. Make sure that you have your login information and potentially two-factor authentication set up and so on. You need to make sure you go in and do that. If you want extra security, that's that two-factor authentication. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's beginning to get more and more prominent throughout websites all over the place. And usually that means you get a code on your phone or something like that when you try to log in. So you have something you know, which is your password, and something you have in your possession, which is your phone for your two-factor authentication. That way they can't just hack your password and log in. The next thing you need to do and make sure is that you set up your payment options so that when Draft to Digital and any of the other outlets that it pushes your book to sell that book, you're getting paid correctly and that money is being put directly into your account. No one seems to want to write checks anymore and send them in the mail. My brother used to call that mailbox money. That doesn't really exist per se anymore. It's all direct deposit. So remember episode number 2, being business ready? Well, here's another good reason to make sure that you are business ready. You'll have to go through some tax identification information and withholding information. I personally do not do any withholding, and I don't worry about sales tax because each of the outlets handles their own sales tax. So none of those things or anything really in that respect I'm concerned about when working on this part of the setup. The withholding information from a tax perspective is really income tax withholding. But again, if you're business ready with your own limited liability company or pass-through business entity, none of that matters too much because you will take that as part of your regular income tax statement with extra Schedule Cs. Again, I am not a tax professional. This is just my experience of what I've seen and what seems to work for me, and it works pretty well. So make sure you go through and do the tax part. You will not regret it. And also be sure to listen to episode number 2, that's 002.selfpubempire.com. Another thing to pay attention to is that there is an Amazon checklist on Draft to Digital, for example. So if you're going to do that, instead of using Kindle Direct Publishing and actually want to try to publish through Draft to Digital to Amazon, you're going to want to make sure that you go through and review that checklist and make sure that everything goes through appropriately. I'm not going to go through that in detail here, but I think that's a good tip to pay attention to is to go look at that checklist if you really want to centralize everything on Draft to Digital. Me personally, I don't recommend that necessarily. You should do what I do, which is do Kindle Direct Publishing first and focus on that, and then expand out to Draft to Digital and really make sure that any books that you're doing on Draft to Digital are not set up for Kindle exclusivity on the Kindle Direct Publishing platform. That's very, very important to do so you don't run afoul of Amazon if they detect that you're trying to do exclusive publishing through them, but yet you're also publishing through other outlets published through Draft to Digital. They don't take kindly to that, and they could remove your account. I don't know of anybody who that has happened to, but do be aware of that. They can do all kinds of things and make sure that you don't do it that way. And they will, again, do anything up to and including removing your account. Another tip on the setup piece while you're doing this in Draft to Digital is to pay attention to the fact that Draft to Digital and Smashwords are now together. Smashwords sometimes has pre-sales and early access and different promotions on their own. It's another outlet and it's owned by Draft to Digital, so they're combined now as a company. You can take advantage of those on the setup pages as well. That's another tip that you definitely want to pay attention to. And in case you didn't know what that is, Smashwords is a self-publishing platform as well that Draft to Digital acquired back in 2022. They boast nearly 1 million ebooks published, so it's another good outlet for your books, particularly if you are writing fiction books. It is popular for fiction books, and Smashwords loves to come up with promotions to push those books out as an outlet. So keep in mind, those two are together. Draft to Digital bought Smashwords, and they use it as their own publishing arm for ebooks with appropriate marketing and other pre-sales and early access and promotions. It's pretty cool. And as a side note, another tip, if you're really looking for the genres that sell well, you can look on Smashwords and see what's selling on Smashwords. They do have top selling lists and things like that. Might give you some ideas onto what to publish. Okay, finally, the book publishing itself, which feels like we've come a long way to get through to this point, trying to help you, my friend, get your book out. Draft to Digital has a very cool, simple wizard that's very similar in the basics to the Kindle Direct Publishing platform. You go through and you make sure you have your manuscript uploaded. You've got that, right? I certainly hope you have your manuscript. You have to have your cover art and all of your other metadata information, keywords, description, pricing that you're going to want to set. All of that information gets loaded into their system through their wizard. It's really a 4-tab wizard currently. Once everything is accepted, you can actually hit just the publish button and select which outlets you're going to publish to. For example, a book that is published through my K-Square imprint is the book American, which is poetry by my very close friend and editor, Gene Lass, that went out recently and is currently pushed out from Draft to Digital to the Barnes & Noble outlets, Rakuten Kobo, Apple Books, Everond, Tolino, Overdrive, which is a library outlet, Biblioteca, Baker and Taylor, Odillo, Vivio BorrowBox, Smashwords, of course, because Draft Digital owns them, Palace Marketplace, and Gardner's. That is a lot of outlets. What is that, about 10, 14 that you can publish to? There's a couple that are still in process. They take a long time to do. That does vary. Here's a little tip I wanted to make sure I point out, is that you can select all these outlets, and some of them publish much more quickly than others. Smashbooks, of course, is going to publish pretty much right away because the systems are all connected. The other outlets take a little more time. Apple Books takes a little bit of time, et cetera, et cetera. Since we published that book through Kindle Publishing as well, we didn't select any Amazon outlets for the book through Draft to Digital. And on the Kindle Direct Publishing side, I made sure personally that we did not make it exclusive to Kindle Direct Publishing, although the print copy is being created through there, and you can do that just fine. That works really, really well. So the number of outlets that are out there that I'm hitting strictly through those two platforms are Kindle, of course, with an ebook and a print book, and Draft to Digital's list of 10 to 14, we're looking at 15 outlets or more. We also did Google Books as well. And with that, we're covering the vast majority of the outlets that you can publish an ebook to. It is pretty amazing what you can do with the right kind of aggregator. And the one, again, we use is Draft to Digital. And we create that for our imprints and work through that platform pretty well through the wizard. The manuscript, of course, and the cover art have specific details that you're going to want to make sure you do as another tip. And that's why I like to use Kindle Direct Publishing first, because they're much more stringent on what that looks like. So making sure that I do it there ensures the quality needed that makes it the appropriate kind of high quality book that I want on Draft to Digital. Okay, wow, that covered a lot of ground. I hope this was instrumental. But let's take a good look and round this up for a high-level guide on how to publish your book out to 99% of the outlets that are out there available. I didn't cover Google Play Books because that is a little different in detail, but generally speaking, it's pretty much the same. I touched on that, and certainly you can go in and take a look at that yourself. You're going to have, of course, an account there. I'm in the future going to have a full course on how to digitally publish your book and do it with print and use the same process and easy step-by-step that I'm talking about here. You can certainly cookbook your way through it with this podcast, and I think you can do it. But if you really want that extra help, especially in the details around the cover art and really doing it yourself and taking total control of your product, I'm definitely going to have that out there on the website sometime in the near future. It's going to be a full course. I think you're going to love it. And I want to ensure that you have a great product to do with what you want with your book and your publishing aspirations. Also, want to talk about making sure that you have an audiobook so you have really every possible outlet covered that can potentially get your book out to your fans that's coming in the future, and letting them know. We're going to have a nice launch in the digital course this year. And of course, this really only scratches the surface because there's tons of promotion available. That is the other part, the marketing piece. Haven't really even touched on that. So look out for that. You're going to love that online course. I really encourage you to try Draft to Digital for getting your book out to as many of your fans as possible. Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Self-Pub Empire podcast. I really hope that this episode helps you get from posts to profits. See you again next time. Thanks for listening.
Hey, congratulations. You just listened to another episode of the Self-Pub Empire podcast. I really hope you found something inspiring, useful, and actionable for your own entrepreneurial and business aspirations. Let's keep connecting as solopreneurs, authors, and online creators of all kinds. For more information, how-tos, great tools, and show notes for the show, head over to selfpubempire.com/podcast. Until next time, let's continue moving from posts to profit.